The primary private equity for the last 4 years, up until the current economic hiccup, was in what? Turns out it was in hedge funds. The majority of those hedge funds were shorting the performance of public equities. That means we were betting against a bountiful future. And that's where most of our private equity money was going. You think that's kind of an interesting anomaly? We were investing in credit default swaps. Like I said before, 5x the face value of the global GDP, betting that people would not perform on their obligations. So, in the zone of nostalgia, what we've really lost is the foolish bets against our neighbor failing. When you actually put it that way, which is ironically what it is, all of a sudden you kind of sit there going, well, maybe that was a good thing not to have. So if I've lost it, maybe it's because there's a generous communal knowledge somewhere out there that said, you really shouldn't have this thing. And when I lose the thing I shouldn't have, I haven't really lost anything. When I lose a bet against my neighbor, I actually may have a reason to see him or her as a neighbor again. When I lose my bet against the business, which is in my hometown or in the neighboring town, and I hope that they fail because I've actually leveraged a short position against their success, maybe when I lose that, I can actually sit down and rather than saying the present greed justifies a short position, I may actually be invited to say, how can I actually build value? When I hear people waxing eloquent about all of the loss in this market, I find myself, in many respects, laughing at the fact that if you actually asked the pension holder today, so what is it that you had and what is it that you lost? It turns out that there was a number on a piece of paper that comes once a month to their kitchen table. And if they're probably 5% of the population, they actually take it out of the envelope. And if they're 1% of that population, they actually look at what's on that sheet of paper. And you find out that the number said $57,000 one time, and then it said $43,000 another time. That $17,000, that $15,000, that $14,000, whatever the decline is in that moment, was what? Was it actually money? Was it actually currency? Was it actually denominatable? Was it actually anything? Or did you lose something which was a phantasm that was a projection based on somebody who wanted to charge you a real fee? So, you know, people look back and say, the Catholic Church, indulgences, how backward that was. Is a 401k any different from an indulgence? And in truth, the answer is, it's just to a different God.
Well, if someone chooses to cash out of their 401k, they would have that money, so that's an argument.
Yeah, would they? People tried to do that, by the way. There's a lot of people who have tried to do that. And do they actually have it? And it turns out that they don't really actually have it because, when you choose to cash out of your 401k, you find out that the real reason why 401k cash outs have a penalty was actually to make a revenue smoothing event for the United States Internal Revenue Service. See, once again, unfortunately, if you actually look into the matrix, you find out that the nostalgic view of this was my pension, this was my security, this was this was that. Turns out if you actually just add the one more dimension that actually is already there, you find out that it really wasn't in your interest. It really was in the interest of the person who was the broker, who actually was getting fees, and that was real money, by the way. The only people who were getting real money out of the 401ks, real cash. The only people who were really getting that cash were the people that actually were moving it around. And it turns out that every time they moved it, a little more came out. And now all of a sudden we have a calamity where we're actually seeing that the numbers that were being moved weren't ever really numbers. So it'll be interesting to see how many fund managers and how many rating agencies are actually held accountable for propping up the myth of the value that was being exchanged that wasn't really value. Because the fees were real value. The fees that were being extracted were real numbers. But they were being extracted off of very theoretical, very ephemeral statements of value that weren't.